Three, two, one, begin. Welcome to the Redacted Culture Cast, where we talk about the philosophy of violence, how we think about violence, not how do we advocate for it, rather, really the sort of nuts and bolts mechanism of when we think about things that involve violence and culture. Thus, gun culture conversations are the forethought. We really are a change in how we think about things. That's a really bad way to introduce it, so I'll work on that. But today, I like to still have my guests introduce yourself. So would you do that for us?
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Trung Nguyen. I'm happy to be on here for us.
And Trung, for the not as an authoritarian statement, but as a background for context, where are you at right now? What are you working on?
As of right now, I just recently retired from Chicago PD. I was on our full-time SWAT team, did 10 years, and called it.
Alrighty. And then, well, that's going to have a whole can of worms to talk about, because Chicago, when you get into like the culture and politics of things, is sort of known for like crime and gun control. I guess it's not really a fun conversation to have, so I look forward to having this one. For those who are listening right now, this is going to be the pretty much only quote unquote ad drop. In fact, it's not an ad at all. This show is sponsored by the listeners. You can head over to our merch page at redactedllc.com/merch. Or you can just go to redactedllc.com and you can find out stuff there. We are in the heat of season 1, Operation 2. So by now, you will probably know what the design is. And remember, hidden messages are the way of the game. So carrying on. So Trung, let's start with the question of like, what is the greatest misconception that I think people who don't live in Chicago have about what you'd consider like the Chicago SWAT team? What is like how is that, what is that environment like?
It's, in all honesty, luckily I'm out because they can't say shit. So I'm going to speak my fucking mind. Chicago SWAT, people think running and gunning all the time, warrants, kicking in doors, doing all this high speed shit. But people got to realize like Chicago is very political driven. It's very PC. The police hands are tied there. So a lot of times when we come on scene and we're setting up a perimeter, we're doing what we're doing to contain an individual or get ready to do certain things. A lot of times it's a lot of sitting around. We can't just magically breach, even though as much as I want as an SOP, first time get on scene, get a team together, breach the front and back door so that the subject or offender does not have an opportunity to barricade himself or herself. But again, Chicago rules, we can't do that. We just got to come set up on scene and wait for the negotiator. So
what is for like, for me, I'm coming from Ranger Battalion background. I don't have any SWAT or police history.
Yep.
And so the distinction between SWAT and being on the beat or being a street cop is sometimes could be portrayed as like the difference between JSOC and the big army. Is that a decent comparison, or is that really kind of apples and oranges?
It really is. It really is. But the game has changed.
It is, as in it's apples and oranges, or it's a good comparison?
It's a good comparison as
Okay.
JSOC and the big army.
So the big army doesn't call JSOC when they run into a certain type of problem. JSOC is running their mission, and in some ways, a lot of the big army is supporting that, at least during my experience, or the small window of my experience. Is that how is that different? Like, when would what is the like? What is it that would distinguish an event? Is it an event that would require a SWAT presence? Is a SWAT a special organization, or is it elements within the team already? How does this work?
Yeah, so the SWAT team is its own special unit inside the counterterrorism unit tree.
Okay.
So we fall with the bomb squad, K9, et cetera, et cetera. And as a police officer, as a patrol copper, you're working the beat. And let's say if I came to a scene and check the well-being or a mental illness call, I came on scene and I knock on the door, and Joe, let's say John Doe answers the door. John Doe answers the door. He has a knife in his hand. then of course you pull out your weapon. You're like, hey, police, blah, blah, blah. What's going on? Drop the knife. And he was like, I want to kill myself. Do not come in here. I'll stab myself or I'll stab you. Then they'll be like, okay, we're not entering. We're calling SWAT.
Okay. So okay, so that would be like I guess that's a little odd to think about it, isn't like that so what is there, is it a capabilities thing? Is it a permissions thing, or is it an organizational thing that would determine a position, would determine like a let's call it a street cop, or like,
Yep.
a police officer to call a SWAT team?
Yep.
Why that distinction? Why can't a police officer, it's not can't, but why is that decision made? Like,
Well, I can't speak for the rest of the nation, but I can speak for the Chicago Police Department. Like I
mhm,
stated, policies against the police officers tying their hands. So nowadays, back in the days, look, a Chicago cop would just come in and do their business.
okay.
They'll just enter and
Mhm,
just take them to custody or do what they need to. Now everybody's real hands off. No one wants to get sued. No one wants to be the next YouTube star.
mhm.
So now they literally have to be like, okay, I'm going to be hands off. I'm going to call my supervisor. The sergeant comes on scene. The sergeant's like, what's going on? They're like, this is what we have. Then the sergeant is the one that usually makes the call to call us or not.
Okay. So is that, because I think it could be a little bit construed as like passing the buck? Because I mean,
Oh, 100%.
there's this. Well, I mean, I don't want to be I don't want to be disingenuous about it though, because like I don't want to be disingenuous in the sense of saying like, oh well, I don't want to deal with this problem, so we're going to hand it off to somebody else. I
Mhm.
don't want to deal with the liabilities of this problem, right? Which is a very like Soviet era, Soviet
Yeah.
style thinking. Like, it's not about solving problems; it's about fixing somebody in the position of taking the blame.
Yeah.
And we don't like that. It's like that is an antithesis of value in our society. How
Yeah.
do so, but yet at the same time, I could imagine there being an equally maybe not valid, but like a contrasting statement of saying it's not the police officer's job to be a hostage rescue negotiator. So of course we're going to call somebody else who has that specialty. You have
Mhm.
you have this kind of conflict between general capabilities of the individual versus specialized troops. And
Yep.
so in the example that you gave of, a man or the officer is responding to a call, opens the door, guy's a knife, says he's going to hurt himself. And he might want to say, I'm not equipped for this situation, then call SWAT. How do you distinguish the difference between him passing the buck and him saying, I actually don't have the tools for this?
Here's the thing. We got to a point on on the Chicago Police Department that no matter what, when you call SWAT, you can't really cancel it unless the lieutenant on scene cancels the call. So
Okay.
regardless if they're passing the bucket or not, it's not up to us anymore. We,
Okay.
we have to roll the package. We have to roll the barricade. We have to roll everything like that. So
Yep.
even if it's a bullshit call, we have to go. And trust me, there were plenty. There were plenty of shots fired. Police sees this dude run into this house, but he sees it,
Hmm.
but he doesn't, does his job of with his partner being checking the place. They'll just call us right away.
Yep.
Like call SWAT.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the game has changed, man. Warrants has went down a lot and SWAT jobs has gone up the roof because
So,
when
okay, you said warrants have gone down, but responsibilities have gone up. So, when you're talking about a SWAT team, you're not exclusively dealing with warrants.
no,
Okay, that's I mean I think these are useful conversations to have, because I think
absolutely.
I don't simply mean it in the sense of, because I'm not looking at it simply in the sense of like the utility of understanding how the police work. I'm thinking about it as in like, how do we think about individual responsibility, right? So like, and it goes right, even you could go back to any sort of like highly politicized event in American policing in the last, who cares, right, lifetime, right? And there always comes down to this question of like, well, he was following orders, but he's still going to prison, or he was doing what he was told, and it's, you have these conversations. Police officers don't get enough training, they don't get enough this, they don't get enough that, and yet at the same time, the average citizen looks at the police officer getting paid a very large amount of money in forms of like what they see as arbitrary training methods. And I will use an example in my own life. I cannot imagine how many millions of dollars were wasted when in the army, that was while I was in the army, that were these sort of like, online click through, sort of, remedial training elements, because I guarantee you they paid top dollar for bottom product. And there were how many times we had to interrupt an entire training cycle, not because of an action that somebody did, but to get lectured by somebody who has no concept of the culture of Ranger Battalion on how not to conduct certain immoral activities. Right. And it's like, okay, dude, this is wasting government money. And so the civilian or citizen or someone like me might go, yeah, I agree that police officers need more training, but they need the right kind of training.
Forrest, what you just said hit the nail on the head for the police department too. Chicago PD is just the same way. An officer, a patrol level officer, the last time they ever got any kind of training was the academy. Once they leave the academy, that's it. Everything is usually online. Like you said, it's click through. Like they had Chicago PD had a 4-block instruction on active shooter online. So you got to sit there and you got to watch this 4-block, 4-hour how to deal with active shooters through little drawn up dots to show you how to move down the hallway. It's ridiculous. And the same thing, what you said, they do a lot of PC bullshit in service training that does not reflect what these officers truly need out there on the field. Like, don't like what you just said it like, the PC, don't say this, don't say that, respect this person's this, respect this person's that. But there is no weapons training. There's no tactical training. There's none of that. That's really going to save these officers' lives, especially in Chicago.
So I know you a little bit, so there's obviously spoilers involved, but you had some military experience before you went into policing.
Yeah. I just had a little bit. I just did a little time in the Range Battalion too.
Okay, so I am super nepotistic. I only have Rangers on the show, which is not true, but it tends to be the case. Probably because we have so much in common. My point being said is, so Ranger Battalion, when you were we're dealing with these like active insurgency kind of attempts of like counterinsurgency, where this is where you almost get like, hints of hints of Rhodesia, of like, we're trying to find the snake, and instead of just stabbing the head over and over again, like breaking up the entire supply line. So the facilitators, the trainers, the bomb makers, all of those people can't like just rebuild the whole apparatus. And for like how do you contrast, how would you explain the contrast between the activities of like counterinsurgency in a Ranger Battalion format as opposed to like an active shooter format coming from a SWAT position?
Man, I would say, see, on the SWAT team, it's different, obviously, right? We train for it. We get schools, we get role players, we get everything. So we train as realistic as possible for the scenario at hand, or the possible scenarios at hand. And the Ranger Battalions, it's different, man. Even though you're on a SWAT team, you're still in the end a police officer. And as any police officers, there's just a certain amount of training they can take. They're like, okay, let's call it. Let's go, let's freaking call it a day and go grab something to eat and, go hang out or something like that. But, and you know how it was in the Ranger Battalion. I mean, dude, we would go all day. I remember in Yakima, we would go all day from dry, blanks, live fire, then to like role players, obviously without live fire. And we used to go all fucking day, and we wouldn't eat till like 23:30 at night, 1 MRE, and that's the standard, right? That's what we do.
Yep.
Here in the police world, it's totally different. It's like clock time, cop time is like, hey, I got an 8-hour shift. Let's do 3 hours and 4 hours of training. And after that, let's go, let's get out of here. So it's a different animal, man.
How much so if someone who's listening to the show is looking at going to be a part of a police unit, or they're already in a policing unit, and they might be struggling with this problem of like, I want to do more, but I feel like I might be the only one. Is that a commonality, or is that just sort of everyone thinks they're the guy?
When you get on a team, obviously it's more responsibility. Guys definitely do want to push each other more. Are there shitbags on a team that don't want to do much? Absolutely. It's like anywhere else, right?
Anywhere else,
but,
yep.
But if you're looking as a police department force, I would say, dude, good luck. because there's going to be a culture thing. It's a big different. Even though they say the police department is a paramilitary organization, in a sense, it is. In a sense, it is definitely fucking not. Like these are civilians with a badge. Like they want to be, but they got a culture like, oh, get some time on a job, kid. They come in, they'll look like, let's say Chicago, for example. Some of these old timers, they've been on a job for so long, their leather gun belt, it's all worn, but they'll never change it. They'll never like get a new uniform. They'll look sloppy. And if you're like a run and gun type of dude or gal who just got out the military and you're looking for that again, I mean, you're being for a big rude awakening. Like you're going to have to find your clique.
Okay, so I think of it this way, and this conversation's come up a little bit before, but you might enter the police. Let's say someone is going to be entering the police force. They might have a sense of naivety of what they're going to be faced with. They're thinking training all the time, premium people, high end, and then you're going to run into that. You're going to find people who aren't of that caliber by choice or otherwise. Maybe they're burned out. And in your comparison earlier, I think the only pushback that I would have is that, like, yeah, in Ranger Battalion, we would like go all day, and we burned out after 3 years. We burned people out, like burned them out fast, because it's not. Some people could hack it, and I'm not saying that everyone who dropped out couldn't make it, but you had young guys deployment ahead of you. You knew because you knew you were going to go overseas. You wanted to be like sharper than sharp could be, but whereas if you're a cop, you don't have that. You don't have any like end state. You just have, I got to make it 20 years. At least how I'm looking at it. And how would you like, if you're going to counsel a young guy going into the police agency, how would you warn him against like the inevitable disappointment they're going to face?
You just got to set your own standard.
Okay.
You got to come in there with your, with your standard, and you're just going to draw the right crowd around you. There's going to be cliques on your watch in your police department. There's going to be those who wants to go out and train outside of their time. There's going to be those who don't. And you just got to find your niche and just, hey, if this is what you want to do and you're adamant about being this type of police officer, which is great. And I wish 100% of police officers were like that, right? In shape, want to train, want to get after it mindset, because this is, in the end, I agree with you, Forrest. They have that mindset that they want to reach 20 years, but you're not guaranteed that you're going to reach 20 years. Like we just had a recent police officer in Chicago in the 8th district just got killed. He got into a foot chase, jump over a fence with his partner. Dude turned around, shot him in the fucking head, shot his partner a couple of times. She was injured, but she survived. I mean, it's like one of those things, it's just like, it's insane, man. And I would tell him, hey, this is a dangerous job. Let's not worry about what these old timers are going to do. Let's not worry if they want to train or not. You be the best you can, because you have a fucking responsibility. You raise that right hand. Let's set that standard for the next generation once you become a senior member in the police department, right? I think that's how you're going to affect change. So if that's something you want to do, continue down that path, continue down that mindset. Okay.
So I'll set up one more question as like kind of a challenging one for me. And this is I can imagine, and this is again the framework question. So if it's a straw man, if it's bullshit, you can let me know. But I could imagine it going something like this: you exist on a police force, and you're motivated to be the best officer that you can be. So you dedicate extra time. Maybe it's an hour a day, right? Every day you add an hour unpaid because you're not on the clock, but you add an hour, and you and one other cop guy train one of your fellow officers train together. You shoot competitions on weekends, you do things. None of these things are end of the world best training ever. I'm not making that argument, but you're seeing dedicated effort in that guy. And as a result of you putting in that effort, it starts changing the culture. Well, you see, maybe an events happen, or you see the natural development of your team, right? And it grows, and you start seeing it spread out. And then as a result, the bureaucracy takes advantage of that and says, well, if they're already doing it on their own, now you can spend another hour of your day not training, because we don't need to pay more for training because you're doing it on your own. And maybe they may not even say it publicly, but now you're going to have to spend an hour of your day sweeping the gym, or doing an online anti something something training or whatever. And so they see that because your proficiency has you have sua sponte risen your own proficiency, that goodwill is taken advantage of by somebody. Or even worse, they say, or it's used against you in the sense like a court of law where you had to use force, and now they're like, well, he trains extra, so this is now, premeditated or whatever. How would you like combat that sense of nihilism that I think could set in?
Yeah, so the police department works differently. And like I said, Forrest, I can't speak for all of the other police departments out there. I can only speak for the police departments that I've worked for, and I've worked for 3 agencies.
Okay.
Speaking of Chicago Police Department, I mean, their training standards are very low.
Okay.
Not going to lie, right? Regardless if you go out and train or not, you're going to get e-learning. That's what it's called, online e-learning for whatever they want to push down your fucking throat that month. So you could be the most high speed dude, like you said, go out and train with your buddies and do all this thing. They're not going to care. They're not going to take advantage of that. They're not going to be like, oh, since he or she is more high levelly trained, let's, take this. No, they are so clueless on their troops that regardless if you train or not, you're still going to be left with the bare minimum of training.
Okay.
So I would be.
Because is there an impetus that how would you what is a solution if you're in because I've met police officers before. It doesn't mean that I know them all, right? But it is definitely the case where it's like you're not the first person who's said like our officers are not receiving the training they need. Do you have any what is a solution, and whether it comes from government or it doesn't? What do you see?
I would say, like you said, Forrest, like in the very beginning, instead of wasting the money producing shit quality e-learning crap that officers are just standing there playing on their smartphone and just clicking, not paying attention, so they could just get through and have printout answers already, so that at the end when they do this post test, they pass regardless because it's already been printed on, passed throughout the whole entire department. Let's take that money and reinvest it in officers' skill set. Let's, for example, in the police academy, I think every single police officer for their 6 months academy should take jujitsu.
Okay.
Right? That's one of those things. Let's train these guys, and not these bullshit baton, get back, sir, strike them in the head, in the arm, hit them like this. Like, they teach you. We all know, in a sense, it's fucking bullshit, right? Under stress, under whatever. I've seen so many times cops whip out the baton and they never done it like they've taught. But I can tell you one thing, because I used to do jujitsu. I got to my blue belt. Even if it's freaking live and nasty and crazy, when I take them to the ground, I can control them. I can pin them. I can make it look professional, not like. And that's the issue when we talk about police being filmed like over excessive force. Is not a lot of times. It's not like they're trying to use excessive force. It's just the Rolodex in their mind of what they've been trained, probably back in the academy, was the last time 10 years down the line or 5 years down. Now they have to use like serious force, that they were doing this technique there. And in the academy, the instructor's like, oh yeah, you're doing it right. But then when they're doing it in the real world and it's not working, they're flipping out. They're like, what the fuck am I going to do now? So they're trying to do everything else in their power to try to take this dude into custody. And it just, sometimes it looks sloppy and it looks like they're using excessive force.
Okay.
So
yeah, I could see that as like the secret move that I was taught in the secret submission move. The nerve pinch didn't work, so Glock it is.
Yeah, for sure. Like like keep beating them with it now. Like, oh, you beat him in that spot, or you put that thing he's not complying. What am I going to do? Oh, I don't know. I'm under stress. I have adrenaline pumping. This dude's resisting arrest. I'm just going to start wailing this baton at him to try to like do something because I don't know anything else.
So what's one skill set that you would recommend from military special operations through policing to civilian citizen application that you'd say that you'd like say this is a good skill to develop?
Your mind.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Your mindset. I think you have to develop the mindset of wanting to be the best at whatever craft you are doing next. For example, if I'm going to be a police officer, when I'm in there, they have to give me, like, it's a mindset thing. Like, hey, look, we're here. This is a serious business. Let's train to the best of our ability. Let's work on our tactics. Let's work on our firearm skills. Let's do this to the best, not just to meet the standards, but to exceed the standards, right?
Okay, so that mindset, you said you need to develop it. Like, what do you mean by developing a mindset? What do you mean by developing a mindset, or how would you describe the process of developing a mindset? Because I can sit here and say, I can approach every training event thinking I'm an unrecognized Luke Skywalker going to save the galaxy, right? I have the motivation. I see the end goal, but seeing the end goal is not that was a little weird. Seeing the end goal is not the same thing as like developing a mindset to observe what do you, and so can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, what I mean by that is being able to have the discipline to recognize that things like this is not going to happen overnight. It is a process that you're going to have to go through, and you got to have the dedication and the will to learn this craft that you're getting ready to take upon your shoulder as a responsibility.
Okay.
So understanding that, hey, this is going to take work, but that's like everything else in life.
So it makes sense. It's really easy to apply that to a Ranger Battalion guy because you've got a mission set. We know where you're going. You're going to go hit, whatever. It's also somewhat easy when you're talking about a police officer. You have a job to do. What about for the guy who's neither of those?
Yeah. Then you just got to have that mindset for yourself as a person. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's apply this more beyond just gun culture. Let's just talk about the discipline of being in top physical shape, or eating well. In the end, it's upon you to develop that discipline. Like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to go get Taco Bell today. You know what? I don't feel like working out, but I'm going to fucking work out because I know this is going to make me better as a human being.
Yes. Yeah. I maybe so developing, like, this is again, this question, I'm trying to go one layer deeper. I'm trying to just go
absolutely.
one layer deeper of, like, do you have, and I know it's not an easy question, so I'm not trying to ambush you with this one, but it goes like this. Okay, I know that I need more discipline. How do I do that? I can tell you when I was younger, I was like, oh, I'm going to join the military. It'll make me disciplined. It may be forced. It didn't make me, but it gave me an apparatus to do it.
Yeah.
It didn't make me. It was a choice that I had to make. And when I was no longer in the military, I have gone through periods of being non-disciplined.
Yeah. Same. It's something that you have to constantly work on. And I tell people like this, being good at something, being fit, being a go-getter, having a sharp mind, being intelligence, it's hard. Being broke is hard too. So choose your fucking heart, right? Regardless of you being a fat, lazy piece of shit, out of shape. You don't want to study. You play fucking video games all day. You work at a convenience store making minimum wage. That's hard.
It is. Yep.
Same thing with vice versa, that situation. You being an individual that is a go-getter, you're working for this freaking company that is very fast-paced, but you're getting paid extremely well. You have all this pressure on you. It's hard.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the recording on my end. Looks like it's frozen. Don't worry about it. I need a pause there, and we're just going to keep going right as we go. So you're going to pop in and pop out. You're still frozen.
Do you want me to exit and come back in?
Yeah, let's do that. I might have to edit the section out because I want to think about that too a little bit as we're going.
Leave studio.
I'll see you in a second. So that has been our while we're in the interim, as Trung joins us, leaves and rejoins us. We're gonna say thank you. Here's your ad break. Bum, bum, bum. And we got him back. Thank you very much for how you guys have been supporting us. All right, Trung, welcome back to the show. I did a fake ad break, so we're not even going to cut it out. Now people know I'm genuine.
Nice.
Where we left off, it's important. I should have done like a Jack Posobiec roll off, but I don't have one right now. So you made the statement, it's hard to be broke. It's also hard to be in shape. It's hard to be. And so you said something kind of like choose your hard.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's how do I say this?
Life is hard, regardless, right? If we decide to be disciplined or we decide to be a fat piece of shit, choose it. Choose which one you want to be, and that's literally it. It's like, do you want to be the go getter? Do you want to be the person that succeed in all the goals that you set out for yourself, or do you want to be somebody who no one could depend on, be a nobody? If that's what makes you happy, then so be it. But it's going to be tough. Life is going to be tough for you in your own ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the other route, but I'd rather have the other route.
I can 100% agree with that sense of like, let's see. I can agree with that life is going to be tough. I mean, I think you can make the argument that like there is hardship in the world. Like, yeah, sure. I think it's God, even getting a political philosophy and like conflicts of, let's just say like conflicts between the races, if you want to go that way, or like Marxism, and you want to go into class warfare, and you want to go into all this kind of stuff. There's a perpetual strain in contemporary Western philosophy that is always focused on the assumption that there is an easy life, and whoever has the easy life must necessarily be oppressing you, because whatever you see your hardship is not your fault but their fault. Like, okay, well, you keep doing that, bud.
Yeah. No, you have no one to blame for your hardship but yourself. And I'm a prime example of that. My family and I fled Vietnam. I came here when I was 3 years old. It was me, my mother, and my two sisters. We had $10 to our name. We were put in a Section 8 home in Chicago, uptown. I grew up there since I was 3 all the way up to I was 17. I wore girl clothes from when I was 3 all the way up to I was in 7th grade because we were so fucking poor. And I was surrounded by gangs. I was surrounded by violence. I was surrounded by drugs. But look where I'm at now. It's because of the choices I decide on myself, not because I'm blaming my environment that I grew up in.
Okay, so growing up around gang violence, growing up and then having time in Ranger Battalion, and then having time in the police force, and then being now, how has your observation and understanding of violence changed?
Oh my God. From the time when I grew up in the hood, violence was necessary for them to survive.
Why?
Right?
Why was it necessary? Like, who's them? What are you talking about? Yourself?
Like, no, the gang violence that's around, these gang members fighting each other or whatever for turf or drugs or whatever they're doing. It was them trying to see who was the most dominant force on that ground, on that battlefield, right? Whoever controls the most. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I get it, but this is exactly where I want to go.
Yep.
Like, okay, so my question is, why is it necessary? Because at any given time, I mean, I'm not going to be crazy about it, but like, okay, fine, take a task force. They won't be gangs anymore. That is a solvable problem if you're willing to forego ethics really quickly.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, it's not a hard concept. But so part of me seeing this idea of like violence was like a necessary part of your life. It's like, no, it's not. It's not necessary in the sense of like, if you don't be violent, you'll die. It's the fact that you've built your culture around killing each other.
Yes, it's true. It has to do with the family that they grew up in, right? A lot of them, like myself, was fatherless. So who do they turn to? They turn to their cousins and their friends out there in the streets. They turn to they see what's going on in them, and they built that culture around them. It was like instilled in them. So now they feel like they can't escape it.
Yeah, I've had firsthand experience in this. So looking back at your younger self and how you observed this like claim for the need of violence, you were there. So you grew up in Chicago and you came back to be an officer in Chicago. How did that perspective change? How did you see that? And what did that look like? Like, what was the point there? Why'd you go be an officer back home?
I wanted to make a difference because a police officer made an impact in my life when I was young. That's what drove me to become a police officer.
What was that? What did they do?
He was just literally, as cliche as this sounds, officer friendly. I mean, I was on the, the corner with my friends playing basketball, just dribbling the basketball back and forth. Those the era when my MJ was still with the Chicago Bulls. I'm dating myself. Just being a kid out there late. This officer just drove by and like, hey man, I'm Officer such. This is where I patrol. I just want to let you know that if you need anything, here's my business card. Call me anytime. I'll be
Okay.
there to help you and your friends. So that really impacted me. I was like, man, this dude doesn't even know me. He didn't even have to get out his patrol car, but he did. He smiled. He had a conversation with me. And I was like, dude, this is cool. I want to do something like this. I want to give back to the community.
Um, so I mean, I imagine that in that sense, like being an officer later, did you look at that interaction differently? Like, was that a risk taking he was making, or what?
He was doing something sometimes a lot of police officers get jaded and not do is get
Okay.
back with their community, get out the car, talk to people, talk to the people that the streets that you patrol. But again, cynicism. Cops does this job for so long. They are filled with negatives. No one calls a police officer when they're having a great time throwing a party. They call the police officer when the shit's hitting the fan and they need them.
Mhm.
So when a cop goes to calls like that day in and day out, they get a little jaded. So then they started to think a lot of certain people are bad, because that's all they deal with day in and day out. But that's far from the truth.
I
They,
don't have police. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
no,
Go ahead.
no, wait.
I don't have police experience, but we do share ranger experience, and like I never really saw it much with the people that I was deployed with that developed a similar attitude towards the indigenous the Afghanis that we were working with. Like, and the one that didn't make it. Let's just say the guy who really like there were jokes and there were little off colored comments, and to be honest, no one cared because it was like it just like that didn't age well kind of thing.
Yep.
But it's not like we threw you under the bus because you made us a bad joke. But the guys that were like who went straight to dehumanizing the local population, they oftentimes didn't have it. Well, they didn't make the cut because they were unreliable. Like, I couldn't trust you in any sort of under pressure situation because you're immediately going to go to like my lie or some sort of like unreliable situation.
Like Ranger smash everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no Ranger smash everything attitude. It just
Yeah,
doesn't
for
work,
sure. Absolutely not.
and so that kind of persona of like it wasn't the persona of being a strong, capable, assertive ranger. Wasn't That was definitely present. Oh my goodness, the alpha ranger was definitely a thing. It was the psychotic guy who immediately goes to dehumanization.
Yeah.
That guy didn't hack it. It
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Very, very fucking sporadic, very just like, yeah, you're right. You can't trust people like that because then they just show you that this explosion or the way they treat certain human beings or just the way they are very random. It could
mhm.
happen at any moment, and that's not the type of people that we want to be around, especially in, like you said, under a position of pressure.
Yeah, well, it's like a liability, right? So like
Yes.
let's take a like even like a contemporary example would be like I okay, so this is hypothetical, right? But this is a hypothetical example. It's not a factual one that I can draw out of my hands. But it would be an example of like you're an officer of some sort, you're a police officer of some sort, and you're engaging with a local population issue, right? And you're dealing with the local population that's complicated because of a combination of organized and semi-organized crime as well as cultural conflicts between people, right? So differences in values, one of the challenges of multiculturalism kind of thing breaking in here. And one of your officers, um when he gets pressured, when he enters into a situation, a high stress environment, maybe when the bullets start flying, he starts throwing out slurs, racial slurs, right? And so he starts dropping the N word or whatever. And given in all reality, he's being shot at by somebody who wants to kill him. And calling somebody a slur after they've tried to murder you is they're probably not equal, right? These are not equal things.
Yeah.
But from being in, but if I'm on a team and that guy does that, if my teammate starts dropping the N word or whatever, dropping the hard R in the middle of a conversation, I'm going to not look at him as reliable, because that is a position, though maybe justified to some extent. I'm not saying it's justified morally, but like I can understand it.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, him saying that doesn't overshadow the fact that just that some horrible human being just wanted to murder him for whatever reason, whatever dehumanization opportunity he had. But I'm going to look at that and go, the problem is that that's a liability, not a
Yes.
liability in a legal sense, but a liability in a tactical sense, because it's like, I need you to be able to sort out things that you shouldn't say when you're in a high stress environment, knowing the environment we're in. We're not saying it's right, but you need to be able to work it out. And now I sound like an officer who sits in an office who doesn't do anything and just deals with legal claims all day. But how would you like? That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Forrest, I'm with you on that one. I've been
Mhm.
in many situations where I was like, oh shit.
Mhm.
I've been in my fair share of oh shit situations as a police officer. And I could tell you, I've never once lashed out on somebody and called them a certain slang because I'm a professional,
Okay.
right?
So
I have a certain, uh, when they come at me at a 10, I'm going to come at them at a 15, but I'm going to come at them at a 15 at a professional 15, if that
okay.
makes any sense. I'm going to bring the violence, but once that's all said and done, I'm going to be the one in control. I'm not going to be one spurting out freaking profanity or things that are showing other people around me that I am out of control. That once something happens, that I let stress get the best of me. I let this environment, this situation, get the best of me. No, I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be collected. I'm going to be talking normal. If I need to raise my voice, I'll raise my voice, but it will never be a screaming, oh, this guy just lost his shit type of scream.
yes,
You
yeah,
know?
there is a difference between a scream and a shout in that way. I
Oh,
will concur 100%.
yes.
There's nothing more embarrassing than impotent rage,
Oh, 100%.
especially especially as like a fighter or a warrior or a soldier, or like your impotent rage is just, it's just embarrassing.
It shows that you haven't mastered yourself.
Well, it's also, it kind of goes back to the bullying things. Bullies
Yep.
pick on kids who complain. I'm not saying that they should pick on them, but they do.
Yeah.
If you never squeal, they poke the pig that squeals. I mean, I know that's kind of derogatory, but there's a certain element of like, it is this way. There's this human element of like, if they're trying to get a rise out of you, then the more you rise, the more they get out of it.
Yes.
It's kind of, don't make that sexual, please. So, well, I mean, it's like the policing question is probably is a very difficult one for me, because it's like, so how have you seen gun culture approach the question of back the blue to defund the police to like how have you been being on having a badge for a while, and also looking at gun culture, look at things like the ATF remove, or taking brace ruling politics, or how gun culture has at times been consistent and times been flippant, and I'm not saying any one person is an example. I'm not saying that gun culture, I'm a representative of all gun culture, but there's a certain tendency of being like, at least be consistent, like back the blue or don't, or what does that mean? How would you approach something like that?
I got to say, when I raised my right hand to take that oath, I swore on the Constitution of the United
Okay.
States, 100%. And regardless of what political mayor or anybody wants to shove down my fucking throat, I would throw that goddamn badge right back at their face. And I said that many times. I would never do any kind of red flag things that is unconstitutional to the citizens of the United States, right? Can I speak for all swinging police officers? Absolutely not. But I can speak for myself. Now, to answer your question about backing the blue and then defunding the police, people got to realize something. The cops come from the community.
Okay. Sometimes, not always.
Yeah, not always. Maybe out of state, but they're human beings in the end of the day, right? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes.
We're not beamed from fucking Mars to come down here and do our job, then beam back up to go to Mars. I think people.
I thought you were all Canadians or from the UN.
Oh my God, yeah. So, I think a lot of people lose that. People think, cops are robots. Cops don't have lives. Cops don't have hobbies or whatnot. We're as human as you are. We just chose to do this job. So that being said, do some cops abuse their power and make us look bad? Absolutely. 100%. Are there cops that do good things that make us look good? Absolutely. And it's like that in every profession. And you got to really look at it as like this. If you don't back the people who are trying to protect you when you call them, then when it's time for you to call them, a lot of them are going to hesitate to do that job because they don't have that backing anymore. And we see it firsthand in Chicago. There's something called priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 calls. And priority 3 calls are usually calls that are like dog on the street, cat in the tree. Priority 1 calls are shots fired, robbery in progress, you name it, person shot. And I can tell you there is so many priority 1 calls right now that are not being answered because there's just not enough officers on the street to answer them, because a lot of them have either quit, retired, or don't want to do the job, or hesitant to leave their certain call to answer another call because of what's going on, the culture in Chicago. And like I said, I can't speak for any other state. I can only speak for Chicago because I've been there for 10 years. And yeah, it's a scary thing. It's a big ripple effect, and it's not good. And it's not good for the citizens,
Okay, I'm gonna write this down because there's 2 questions that I have for you. Like, and this, I appreciate that you're talking like as both an individual and as a police officer, not to just like fluff your skirts or anything. But these are hard questions because like it's really hard to get a good conversation from trying to cross like the police line, maybe say, because there are certain things that you have to keep guarded. And like I understand this, we mutually understand this from being in like Ranger Battalion, is that there's things that you just don't talk about because it's careful, right? Like you don't talk about it because like I wouldn't tell my mother when I was deploying because there's a certain risk in it. And it's also not appropriate because her knowing on a certain day isn't going to change anything, right? It's just like, hey, I'm going to be gone in this window, and so, but my point being said is, there's no way that I can say this that won't sound disingenuous, but I'm going to try to present it in the most good faith argument I have. You made a statement saying that you signed an oath to the Constitution. And then you said, if you're going to tell me to do an unconstitutional law, I'm going to throw that badge at your face. The question that I have is, on what standing do you make that decision? I mean, you could say it's on the Constitution, but there are people with different opinions on what that means. What did you do? What did that come from? How did you deliberately build that?
It's just from my morals.
Okay.
I have morals of wanting to do the right thing. And to me, when I took that oath, it means more than just putting on a fucking badge and a uniform and telling people what to do or taking people's freedom away, right? Because that's what police officers do. When you get arrested, you get your freedom taken away. Yep. That's one of their powers. And a lot of people have a power trip about that. But me, when I signed up to do this job, I signed up to do this job because I cared about the people I wanted to protect, the community. So on that basis, if my lieutenant came up to me like, hey, Trung, we got a warrant we're going to do today, and we're going to serve this warrant because this person has a pistol brace that they're not supposed to have, and we're going to go and confiscate his fucking weapon, I would be like, yeah, fuck you. No, you can either write me up, you can either put me on the desk, or you can fire me, but I'm not going to be doing these things because this is not right.
And I'm assuming that every officer has their own line in the sand.
Everybody does. And it comes back to this whole COVID thing. And I'll be very transparent with you. I never got a COVID shot. And the Chicago Police Department threatened to fire me multiple times. And there were officers who took the shot because they didn't want to lose their job.
Yep.
But my morals, I was like, fuck you. You can fire me.
Mhm.
I'm not going to take a shot. I'm not doing any of that fucking bullshit because this
Mhm.
is what I believe in, and I don't need it. You know, from what I've gathered from my investigation of what with that situation, and it's going to be the same thing for us when it comes down to this. There's going to be officers who are like, "Oh, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my job." Fucking bullshit. You can say no whenever you want, and I think that's the failure in the police department is we don't know how to stick together.
Yeah, well, I think I think we're seeing that a lot of that fragmentation across culture as a whole.
Yep.
Jordan Peterson would make has made a comment something like, well, maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was Jack Donovan. Oh gosh, I can't remember.
Yep.
But they made a comment of like, um, let's see, it's something to do with like freedom is the ability to say no. Maybe there's a couple of people who've said something like that.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's intellectual freedom or individual freedom, but then also like financial freedom. And in like Nicholas Nassim Taleb, like having fuck you money is basically saying, I don't need this job. You know, I don't need this position.
Yep.
I have that sense of freedom. How would you, so maybe that sort of power, not power in the Marxist way, but in that ability, is something worth cultivating. How then? I guess I'm dealing with this intellectual problem in my head. Then is that I see two simultaneously not contradicting but tense concepts in tension with one another. And one of them is I recently moved from Minneapolis, and Minneapolis is dealing with a similar problem to what Chicago was dealing with. And
Yep.
that problem goes something like they lost a lot of officers, especially after the Chauvin George Floyd incident.
Yep.
And probably for good reason, because they found out that they were basically, you know, chattel to be sold by their betters, or so speak. And whether or not you agree, whether or not we have any opinion about Chauvin at all, there was just a convenient attitude of like, yeah, you're disposable. You signed your life to defend the Constitution, and whenever we don't want you, we'll just get rid of you, right? So there's on the one hand, I mean, and that's probably too vague, but there certainly was a massive disheartening discouragement that took place across the Minneapolis and surrounding area police forces. So we have this problem, and we have this problem that one, the attitude of people, the attitude of people who, or there was an attitude held within people, though they denied it, that the police was going to save them. I don't need a gun because there's a police officer I can call. This is the ivory tower problem. Oh, I'm a good person in society. Nothing bad could ever happen to me. Why would I ever need a gun? Like, I know people who like that. Fine.
Yep.
Then you had people who were, had deliberate, let's just go with like overt hostility towards the police officer. These people are usually in the terrorist line of things, who are incapable of parsing out humans. Or unwilling. And then you had, the general population. And so now you're looking at a city like Minneapolis or a city like Chicago, which has a combination of simultaneously rising crime and decreasing capability of a police force in tension with. So the police, you have this issue of like the void of power. And then also, but that is in tension with this idea of no one is coming to save you, and you should never act like that. In other words, you're condemned if you solve the problem yourself, and the police officer is condemned if they solve the problem that you're themselves. How would you look at a situation like that? Like it seems like an unsolvable problem to me. I mean, from the ground level, no, but like, do you see how I'm kind of building this? It's like
Yep.
gun culture is very independent. It's like individual responsibility. I'm responsible for my neighborhood. I'm
Yep.
responsible for my, family, or whatever. And
Mm.
yet I'm living with people who are either passive, not passive in a moral sense, but passive isn't like, I'll just call the cops, or they're even worse, activists who will burn your house down and then call the cops on you. And then if you show any form of resistance, or so you have all these problems. You have all this massive social problem of there are no police to save you anymore. Vigilantism is morally dubious. And then you have all these issues. And how would you even start to address that problem?
Man, it really starts with that's a big one because when you have a big melting pot like Chicago, where everybody is together and coming from all walks of life, and you just described it. of just how Chicago is. There's going to be parts of people who are like, yeah, I can call the police, which is the wrong thing, because I believe that every citizen, good citizens, should have the right to arm themselves, to be able to protect themselves. Because there's going to be times when you call the cops and we're not going to come for 5 to 10 minutes, not because we don't want to, just the volume of calls. And by the time we get to you, shit's already been gone. And we've come to calls many times where that situation happened, right? And it could have been, I wouldn't say, yeah, resolved if they had the training and the know-how of how to defend themselves and deal with that situation. And then there's those who just want to see this freaking the system burn. We are the man. We're the bad guys. We're the anti for the people. We're freaking want to oppress the people. I mean, it's insane. And I really believe it comes down to the school systems, right? It comes down to school system. It comes down to what is being taught at home from their parents. You can either teach your kids growing up to be like, hey, hate the police. Don't rely on them. They are freaking racist. They hate people of color. They believe in white supremacy. All cops are racist. Or you can change that and be like, hey, you know what? Cops are not bad guys, not bad gals. They have a job to do. A lot of them do it because they believe in it and they have a passion for it. And you should respect the law, right? And then you see stuff that's happening now in the school systems. I mean, if you don't see it yourself, like, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist but the thing is, and when you do police work for so long, you start seeing clues and trails being left behind. And I really believe that our school systems being infiltrated by other countries for the people that are going through it now to think the certain way they do, what they're being taught. Because we've been a superpower for so long, and people like China, people like Russia, they know they cannot fight us head on because we will whoop their ass, right? So how are they going to win? They're going to win by destroying us from within, destroying our school system, putting ideology of thinking in the school system to brainwash the next generation to forget of where we came from. If you think about how our grandparents thought and how they were raised compared to how kids are now, especially in the inner cities of Chicago, talking about non-binary, talking about, it's okay if you're a boy, but you want to be a girl, guys can get pregnant and stuff like that. And you started like passing on that type of thinking in our kids. And it's so fucked, man. It is right now.
Yeah, it's like it becomes a bit of an intellectual problem. Now, I was homeschooled, and I was homeschooled in rural Minnesota. So, like,
Wow. Lucky you.
Yeah, right. My parents made a sacrifice to make it happen. My mother literally quit her career, which she had a, I'm not saying she had the cushest job in the world, but her career was a career. It was a master's degree level career in the 80s and 90s. So she was working before she had me. And back when a master's degree was worth something. And so yeah, they made that decision and they made that sacrifice and whatever. So that's cool. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to cast aspersions on the education system incorrectly. Right. And because I mean, right now it's the education is such a hot button topic. Everyone wants to talk about the education system. And it's like, whether it bothers me because you can get everything from, the education system was created by industrialists to create the ideal factory worker. That's because that was the solution to the problem of starvation.
Yeah.
Right. So like it was designed at that time for the needs of the time. I'm not saying that, you had the choice between industrialized education and basically illiteracy is one way that you could portray it, or agrarian cultures, or, the noble savage or whatever. So it's not that simple. It's just frankly not. But so when it comes to the education system, the one thing that I found probably most terrifying is the mind that leaves the high school or even the college who would have been better off if they never attended.
Agreed.
They're so intellectually lost that even the ability to consider basic reality has been unmoored from their cognition. It's terrifying. It's like giving a chainsaw to, it's like blindfolding a guy, covering his ears, giving him a chainsaw, and then pushing him out into a crowd of people. Like, it's terrifying. And that's probably a weird metaphor, but
That makes sense though.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I do think that there's it's not that I do think that there's a problem with the education system. I think that it's easy to say there's a problem with it. I'd like to start identifying issues and solutions, because yeah, it's not fine. I'm gonna solve it one more time. I'm just gonna distill it one more layer. In the in the American cultural conversation, when it comes to gun control, the professionals are never asked. Anyone that you never have a Navy SEAL walk onto the floor and be like, this is what this is and this is how it works. You never have the manufacturer of a device, which would be a little bit of a conflict of interest, but you never have, Jerry Micklick, a world level competitive shooter, testifying before Congress on how a short barreled rifle isn't a thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you never have anyone who knows anything what they're talking about. It's illiterate Democrats with, witty, somewhat, snapbacky conservatives, and then the internet chatter sphere. And that's what it is all the time.
100%, man.
And so when it comes to school shootings, does anybody ever once go to the police officers in the area and say, like, how would you how would you challenge or solve this problem? Or do they go to like Berkeley lawyers who couldn't spell their name? How do you see that going on?
As of right now, it's going that way that you're saying.
Okay.
It's not going to the subject matter experts. Bring them on the table, be like, hey, this would work. But instead, it's more like, how can we pull attention, or how can I pull more votes towards me?
Okay,
right?
so can you identify who it is that's responsible for making that decision? Where's the locus of problem, right? Because you're not going to get rid of active shooters in a day. And if you
No.
and if you were to do it, it would come at the cost of so much liberty, would probably be immoral.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get rid of active shooters in a day. And so every time one happens, a certain gaggle of people, all, but who makes the decision on where the change is made? It's, at least in Chicago.
I'll tell you what, the Chicago Police Department has a ranking system, right? Obviously, like any other paramilitary organization or military organization. So for the highest boss for the police department is a superintendent or a chief, depending on where it is. So for Chicago, it's the superintendent. But you think he runs the show for us?
I don't know. I don't know.
No, he doesn't. The mayor runs the show.
Okay.
The mayor decides who she or he hires or fires as the superintendent. So the one that is in power runs the show. So what she does is she pulls all these bosses, quote unquote bosses, deputies, street deputies, whatever fucking deputies you can think of that got that position, into a room, and they sit down in this fucking table, and she, which is Lightfoot, is like, hey guys, just to let you know, I'm the motherfucking boss. And you can try to dictate how this police department is going to be run. I'm going to show you how this is going to be run. And all of them are going to be like, yes, ma'am, because they don't want to lose that position. Because she'll make it clear, or they'll make it clear. If you don't like what I'm doing, you can either retire, because a lot of them already have over 20 years. We're going to force you to retire, or we're going to demote you and send you to a district opposite from your house.
Okay, so it's punishment by. Okay.
Yes, it's ran by the political power. She or he decides the moving puppets. So the superintendent is basically her bitch, her puppet.
Yep. But if I were to steel man that position, it's so that the police does essentially this is a steel man. It's trying to represent the position as best as possible. Is that the mayor is an elected position, and she has oversight, being as presented, voted in a position by the will of the people, has then oversight over the institution, so that the institution does not have power over the population. That, like, this is a steelman argument. I'm not saying that it isn't subject to corruption. And I think Lori Lightfoot just lost her latest election, correct?
Yeah, even the Democrats voted her out. That's how horrible of a person she is.
Yeah, well,
A mayor.
yeah,
And here's the
yeah.
funny thing: she was like, I got voted out because I was a woman and I was black.
I thought people voted for her because they didn't want a bridge troll to run Chicago anymore.
God, man, I would take Rahm Emanuel over her any fucking day. She has run that city to the motherfucking ground, dude. Like,
Yeah, well, I don't know Chicago politics, so I'm not going to be authoritative on it.
yeah,
But I mean, it is. Let's just be frank. Not for lack of trying, I haven't seen anything good come out of her office. So,
no.
her does she identify as a she? I don't know anymore.
She runs that place like a dictator, dude.
Well,
And just and then I'll tell you what, and I'll just keep this short because people need to know about this.
Mm-hmm.
Her home, when the whole riots happened in 2020 because of, the situation with George Floyd, a lot of business owners were complaining like, hey, our properties are getting destroyed, blah, blah, blah. She's like, oh, it's only property. Then when they started marching towards her house, she literally had a police district, which is like a division, one police station, man her whole block, blocked it out, protected her property, right? For her property. So that being said, now she has so the mayor, they have something called the mayor's detail. So basically it's like the Secret Service for the president to protect the president. The mayor detail is a 20-man unit that protects the mayor 24/7. They pick her up, they drop her off, they escort her everywhere. Well, that's what she only supposed to have. But she took a police-sized station and had it manned 24 hours around her house.
How large is this? How large is this unit, this station?
This, I would say, a station would be anywhere from like 80 cops to 100 cops. So she would have any given time a shit ton of cops in marked cars, unmarked cars, parked in front of her house, parked in her alley, roving around her block, parked down the street on an adjacent block, manning her house, regardless if she's there or not. And on top of that, and I can speak on this too because I was there a lot of times because I was forced to be there, is she has a SWAT unit sit at her house 24/7 if she's there or not. So thinking of all that asset that could be out there fighting crime, taking criminals off the street, whatever, they're forced to stay there to man this house, regardless if she's there or not.
Yeah. Well, it smacks of let them eat cake. I mean, it really does. But we've seen it across the country, man.
Yeah.
Like I remember when that happened because the news reached me in Minnesota at the time, and it was. I mean, it's probably going to be cold comfort to you, but I think she was lambasted across the country for being like, okay, you are tyrant, like
horrible.
But I mean, yeah. So here, let's go back to that issue of like insurgency and like I'm not saying riots and protests because that's such a politically jargon term, but like let's go back to the street problem of cops and policing, and I think the citizen, not the police officer, but I think the citizen could get a little bit pessimistic because they are faced with an untenable problem, an unsolvable problem, and they're forced to choose between the crime in their backyard or the potentiality of a police force capable of handling, this is in quotes, handling that crime being wielded by somebody like Lori Lightfoot to attack her political opponents. So as a citizen, as a citizen, I think this is a realistic thought experiment that many people, or thought problem that people are faced with, is that I have to choose between the tyranny of the drug dealer and the cartel member and the whatever the 076 gang or whatever the term is, like I know that was the wrong reference, but they're forced between the perhaps like this maybe explains what you said earlier. You as a child growing up in Chicago, violence was a way of life. They're forced to choose that and the boot of tyranny crushing down upon them, or the potential of that boot of tyranny, and how, like, what I don't want to just give you unsolvable problems. You're just such an interesting guy to talk about it coming from a like having police experience, especially in somewhere like Chicago, which even I'm not even a conservative, but or I guess maybe I don't give a shit anymore. People like me who'd be like, oh,
For
Chicago,
America.
20, yeah, rural America, like 23 people died in Chicago this weekend. No one gave a shit about that,
No.
Um, so I don't want to turn Chicago into like essentially America Somalia or America Mogadishu, right? Like
It is though.
oh well, there you go. I
Just
tried.
heyjackass.com. Look it up. They post official statistics that they get from the newspaper and everything on murders, gunshots, and everything like that. And you can see the raw data
Mm-hmm.
of how many people are murdered in a year, in a month, in a week.
So like what? So Chicago has one of the most notorious laws, or most notorious schemes for dehumanizing their population by stripping them of their Second Amendment rights. How does that work? Like, what is your like? How have you seen that affect people? Have you seen that affect people on the street? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. You literally can't carry anywhere that you would probably need to carry because they have so like, oh yeah, you can get a concealed carry license, then you have to get a FOID card, which is a firearms identification card. You have to get all these fucking cards just to be able to carry. But then there's bylaws where it says, hey, you can't carry in a library, you can't carry into this, you can't carry into this, you can't carry. So basically, usually the only spots that you can carry are the spots where you're probably not going to really encounter any kind of a hostility that you would if you were to go into the public area where all the hostility is.
mm-hmm.
It's messed up, man. They're just taking the rights away from the citizens, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Do you like even from like a not a crime statistics, but from your let's just say your heuristic of street knowledge, do you think a relaxing of that laws would have a positive or negative effect on the population?
it would have a positive effect.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you, but I would like to hear how you would think about it, how you'd articulate it.
Armed society is a polite society.
This is true. I agree with you there.
I would not if I know that. Hey, if the law came down like, hey, citizens, if you're a good great citizen and you're not like a felon, blah blah blah, you can carry. Right now, I would, as a criminal, I would be more hesitant on who I'm going to motherfucking rob because now I'm like, he might be armed, she might be armed, grandma might have a pea shooter, but if you take something like Chicago and all the gun restriction that they have, now you're just now criminals don't have that.
They don't have that ethical restriction.
No, they'll carry a fucking. They will carry a an automatic lock that they modified with a fully extended fucking magazine in their gun, and a laser driving around.
Yeah, we started seeing that a lot in Minneapolis after 2020. From what I understand, the Bloods, and this is going to be me with my white boy rural Minnesota gang knowledge, but as far as I understand, there was a pretty substantial presence of the Chicago Bloods that moved up into Minneapolis after 2020. And I'm not going to be I'm not the intel analyst on the subject, but that's just how it was described.
Yeah.
So here's that silly question then. So if you as a police officer know, you can make the argument, or as a police officer, you could say, no, this would have a net positive effect on the population. You as an individual would be able to, understand it from a format of ethics and responsibility and constitutionality. So the people who are at the decision-making level for that, why don't they know that? Or do they know that and want the pain? Because you just made the argument that the fact that they have gun control is directly causal for the violence. When that politician gets up on the stage and says, we're going to institute a ban on the magazine clip, what they're saying is, we will cost you 30 lives a weekend because you can't carry anything. And that's how I see it, is that any politician who's advocating for gun control is saying, I will have my security at the cost of your life, damn it. Oh. And so, but that's how I see it. How have you seen it on the political level? Not the political level as in like Democrats versus conservatives, but like the powers that be within Chicago. How do they approach the subject?
They posted saying that they're so out of content and reality. You know,
Okay.
a lot of them have the protection and live in that bubble.
Is it
So
ignorance or malice?
I say a little bit of both.
Okay. Okay.
Um, they will say certain things to do certain things to get votes in the end of the day.
Sure. I mean, a
That
politician has to get votes.
that is literally it. Like, and you brought up a good point. You know, a gangbanger could be shot 50 times. Like, we had so many people shot in one area that could have considered a mass shooting, but it never airs on television as a mass shooting. Like, we had one incident over their radio. I remember there was a call at a restaurant. Actually, a restaurant at night turned into a club. It was a they call it a white party because they wear white clothes. That was the theme, and this dude came in there, and I guess they got drunk and words got exchanged, and dude let out some gunfire and killed like 5 to 6 to 7 people. You know, in my book, that's called a mass shooting,
Okay.
right? That now, if that would have happened in the school or somewhere where it could be politicized, that would have been all over. Oh, mass shooting, mass shooting. Let's do this. But since that happened in a urban environment in the ghetto with people that they expect to shoot each other, it's just another day.
They expect to shoot each other. Wow, that's a bit. I'm not saying. I mean that. If you, I don't know how to say that as any other way than derogatory. Oh no, they're just Chicagoans. They're just gonna shoot each other. Let them have cake. I mean,
It is.
it's extremely derogatory. Like it's so dehumanizing. I don't know how to think of it any other way.
It's when you see, I'm pulling it up right now.
Mhm.
I mean, March to date, right? This is March to date. And we're only on March 8th. There's already 13 homicide, 52 shots, shot and wounded 40, and shot and killed 12.
This is in
Chicago, just
today or just the month of March.
the month of March.
Oh, geez.
And the week right here, 3-5 to 3-11, 7 shot, 25 wounded, 32 shot. Shot and wounded is 25. So altogether it's 32 shot because if you count the shot and killed, the 7. So they got 7 homicides. But that's just another day in Chicago. They even have something called a person shot clock. It shows you every 3 hours, 48 minutes, and this changes all the time depending on the summer. It's going to go a lot lower. It's going to be about like an hour and 30 minutes.
Okay.
So right now, since it's still winter time and people are kind of still inside, you know, every 3 hours and 48 minutes, someone's shot. Every 15 hours, 32 minutes, somebody's murdered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's just, it's another day. No one, they don't bat an eye for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're dealing with a population of that size, it does scale. It's not scaling. It is a very much so a modern problem. You're talking
Super
about
amount.
millions of people crammed into a city. I mean, it's tough. So
But take a look at the size of Texas. I don't see them having this type of problem.
yeah, but you're also looking at the entire space of Texas. You're talking about a density problem.
No, for sure, man. I get it.
You're also dealing with you're also, I mean, and I'm not, this is not diminishing it. But it was a very classic argument that was brought up, and I remember when it was made, it was something like, okay, well, how come the Japanese don't have this many, murders? And this is it's the classic illiterate gun control argument. It's like, because they're a culturally and racially homogenous society. Like 99% of them are culturally and racially, if you want to use the term race for whatever it is, they're all Japanese. So like there's a certain, they have this commonality across them. And it's not a discredit to their population. Rather, you look at America and it's the melting pot. The cost of melting pot is dangerous freedom versus, slavery or safety and slavery. If you want to have people of different cultures and values try to melt together, you're going to have friction between ideologies. And in order to eradicate that friction, you must either A, stomp it out with a crusade. Anyone who doesn't follow by our ideology is crushed, or you must have some sort of overarching ideology, which we believed was the Constitution. And that Constitution probably took the risk. What was the great gamble? What was the great experiment of America? That we could have a meta series of values that, as long as we collectively held these: right to liberty, right to speech, right to bear arms, right to privacy, right to property. If we could collectively agree with these things, then everything else underneath it would be able to commingle. And I don't know if that actually works. From a metaphysics argument, I don't know if I think it really does. And we are in question of it. But or in other words, it only does if everyone also values people as essentially created in the image of God. And now you add atheism, you add different forms of belief systems that fundamentally dehumanize people to being bugs, or naturalistic determinism, or even like religiously or racially superior arguments, and all of these kind of problems. Like, they do not mesh. It's a complicated problem, and simple solutions never bring it to the table. So, but I do have to pause here. I don't want to just talk to you about being a cop, because there's a little bit more to what you're going on now. So now that you've retired, what's going on in your life? What are you up to these days?
Well, I can say I got the fuck out of Chicago. I'll tell you that right now.
Good for you.
I'm moved down in Texas. I live in Texas now. I'm running my company. We Go Home full time. So that's what I'm doing.
What's behind the name? The name We Go Home. What's like? I think I get it, but I want to hear it from you.
We Go Home was something that I started a long time ago inside my heart. You know, as gay as that might sound, but it has to do with a lifetime of service to my country, to my community, to my brothers and sisters to my left and right. And I've seen the full spectrum of what we were, meaning as somebody who are called upon to do a job, called upon to serve a higher calling, and going out there risking limb and life for people we do not know. But at the same time, when you're out there training and surrounding yourself with these individuals, you start to know their families, you start to know their wives, you start to know their girlfriends, their mothers and brothers. So you build this bond. So what We Go Home is to push that message, like, your job is dangerous. Whatever you do, fire, police, military, first responders. It's you sign a blank check. The day that you step out at the door, it's not guaranteed that you're going to come back home. And the same thing goes for your brothers and sisters that you served. And everybody knows, especially you, Forrest, because you lived that life too. When we're out there in that battlefield, it's really no longer about me. You know, I care about my boys to my left and my right that I joke around with. I hung out with their girlfriends and wives and daughters and fathers, and I want to get them home. So the message of We Go Home is to instill that mindset that you have to be mentally sharp. Your skill set has to be sharp. You have to be physically fit. You have to have that whole spectrum, because you are called upon. When you're called upon to act in a situation of adversity, you have to come with your A game. I'll be damned if I let my brothers die on my watch because of my lack of capabilities, because I refuse to be a piece of shit. So that's the message, the mantra behind our company, is to push it, to make assets for their organization, to know that, hey, be a professional. Let's do this right. You want to do this job? Let's stay fit. Like, little things like that matter in the end.
Yeah, so like that question could be seen as a little bit of a layup, and the reason why is, like, I wanted to hear you talk about it again. I wanted to hear you talk about, like, where did this idea come from and how did you start building with it? Because this is not a diminishment, but I understand the call to service, and then there's also the call to excellence. So so there's a supplement side to your company, right? So you've got is that what else does it, like, what are you doing with it? What is it? Is it a training organization? What are you seeing? What needs are you seeing trying to fill?
We're building a culture.
Okay.
That's where we're building. It's beyond a brand. It's beyond just buying shit. We're
Mhm.
building a culture of people who are like-minded, who wants, for like you said, a call of excellence, to be better, to set the standards and to exceed it. So yeah, do we sell supplements? We absolutely do. We sell some of the best motherfucking supplements in the supplement industry.
Mhm.
You know, we sell apparel, we sell workout programs, we do training. We did one with Method out in Oregon State at Gold Beach Police Department. We put on a 3-day free active shooter course for them, for the underfunded police officers out there. About 50 cops came from all around that region. You
Mhm.
know, and that's what it's about: building a community of like-minded individuals who wants to seek excellence.
Yeah, the part about that that encouraged me is that, like, and this is a personal thing, and I don't mean to be. No, I said that too many times. This is the thing that encouraged me about it is that, like, we can spend a lot of time complaining about the problems from the top. We can talk. We have a lot of frustrations with, like, political issues, government issues, tyranny that's occurring in Chicago. The issues that are going on in Minneapolis, cultural tyranny, cultural malfeasance happening in the education system. And yet there seems to be this kind of attitude in Americanism, which is just like, leave me alone. Like, I just want to go do my thing, leave me alone. And I don't think that attitude is tenable anymore. Like, you can't just exist. Stationary is stagnancy. And
Yes.
so it was like, okay, you saw something, because I didn't attend the training that you did with Method, and I know the guys at Method, right? But it was like, okay, so they're just doing it. Like, sure, maybe it'll work out, and I that was encouraging.
Yes,
So
absolutely. We wanted to step up and be the difference. You know, like you said, we didn't want to live that life of like, hey, this is all about me. I don't care what the fuck's going on around me. I just want to do my thing and live in my bubble. You know, we realize that it's a bigger picture than that. And you know, being social media, and here's the thing: social media is one of those things for us. And you know that more than ever. It's like it could be super fucking toxic, like, or it could be super positive. You know, and that's where we want to take it. We want to take it in that positive aspect, being able
mhm.
to, you know, inspire others to do great things. You don't know how many DMs I get saying like, "Hey man, thanks to you, I've applied, I've got onto this police department, I've joined the SWAT team, I joined the military because you showed me that it's possible. This is something I've always wanted to do, and you've inspired me." And I think that's a great thing. I think it's a big responsibility for guys like us that you might not think that we do make an impact, but we do.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question for me, thinking about it, because where I'm at now, I'm looking at it from where I'm at now. I'm looking at it from, like, community and culture, and seeing these questions in, like, in gun culture as a whole. And this is when I got out of the military. I kind of expected to have that, like, difficult transition period of, like, going from, I think my stomach's talking. But I had this, how do I say this? This attitude of, like, I knew that life was gonna be difficult when I got out of the military. The transition was gonna be difficult. But then what I found out was that the same challenges that I was having as a veteran getting out of the military were the same ones that people who had never been in the military dealt with. Things like aimlessness, loneliness, not loneliness like I'm alone, but, like, no true sense of camaraderie. Um, maybe, kind of like a nihilistic approach to the world of, like, there is no dragon to slay, just cockroaches. And I just ran into the problem of it. Like, that is not unique to people in the military. Maybe some of it is, military was my escapism for a little bit, like, trying to get out of, the kids aren't all right in America problem. So, but I see that as maybe a little bit of how it goes. Like, I don't know. I'm looking at it from a cultural standpoint, because I can see the military and having a dedication to the craft as, is it the is that the solution, or is that the side effect of the solution, and I think it's a little bit of the latter. I don't really see what you're doing at We Go Home as some sort of like the supplement and the training is the solution. It's the call to action and the call to adventure that seems to be much more the solution.
Yes.
We don't have a shortage of capability. We have a shortage of meaning and direction.
Yes, 100%.
You know, like I think the city of Minneapolis was the perfect example. They lost the sense of purpose. They just gave up. They died. Good luck. So that's kind of a tragedy.
That is a tragedy, man.
It just is. It's like, well, and it's not as a whole. Like, to my Minnesota peoples, I don't hate you, man. I'm trying to think of it as like, you're not going to get it from the top. We're not going to do this. Like, even where I'm at here, you know, we're having issues with like election problems and cartel issues in the border and whatever's going on in the world. And it's like, yeah, I just can't expect somebody to come in and save me.
Yeah.
So
I agree, man.
yeah. So let's see. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up? Like, there's a couple subjects. I have one more final question for you, but we have a little bit of time before either we can kind of, well, I'd love to have you on again. That's for sure.
Yeah. Of course, you're a great guy, man. It was wonderful meeting you and your wife in Vegas. Had such a great time. The shoot we did was freaking awesome.
It's a great time.
Dude, you're the way you think and the way you direct certain things, you definitely have a freaking talent, man. So continue doing that. I think you're going to be doing more epic, dope shit, and hopefully I'm involved in it, and we can continue to do part 2 of that event that we did somewhere else.
Yeah, we're working on some projects right now. I'm in that position where I don't yet have the resources to do the things that I want to do, but I'm starting to draw them out. And now I'm starting to figure out, how do I get there? And they're not I don't need billionaire money to make it happen. I'm just like, I just need to get a little further, and then I can make the next thing work. And I do appreciate the compliment. I mean
it from my heart, bro. I'm not trying to stroke your ego. When I see talent, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm gonna call a dog. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna fucking say anything else. So
thank you for not calling me a spade then, because as the line goes. So I've got 2 final questions, but one of them is for you to put anything else. But the meaningful final question is a little bit of, if you were to talk to an officer who's struggling with that decision of, they have pressure from above, not necessarily tyranny pressure, like go strip them of their things, but you have pressure from above to be mediocre, and pressure from below to that you're the tyrant or whatever. What advice would you give to them? That they're in the thick of it, right? That the people from above, they have no support from above, or even worse, the antithesis of support, that their leadership wants them to be milquetoast and mediocre and immoral to the sense of abdicating responsibility, and the people below them, not below as in like lesser than, but the community they're a part of is being artificially and naturally motivated, not justified, but motivated to sort of excise them like a tumor.
Yeah, hate them.
What would you say to that guy or that gal? What do you say to the cops of Minneapolis who have been abandoned by their population and their leadership?
It's a very tough subject. Every cop, every person, I wouldn't even call them cops because they're human beings, deal with it differently. And I'll tell you how I would resolve that. I would leave and go to a different police department to go work for someone else that appreciates me. And I guarantee there is many police departments around this nation that will appreciate your hard work, and citizens will thank you constantly than sitting there and suffer. But then again, it comes down to comfort zone, right? I mean, some cops refuse to leave because they're comfortable. 2 paychecks a month. They know their place they live. They don't want to uproot their family. But that's one of those things that you're going to have to really think of if you really hate what you do, or else you're going to end up taking your life, like a lot of police officers done in the Chicago Police Department last year. They had no one to turn to. You have your brothers and sisters next to you to turn to. That's who you need to get together. You need to talk to each other. You need to work it out and be like, hey, look, this is the situation. We need to stick together. We need to do the right thing because we still believe in doing the right thing as a police officer, or we can play the political game and follow what these goofballs are doing above, or we can let our hatreds and our feelings take over and hate the people who hate us, and we can play this hate game back and forth, and basically saying fuck you the citizens, and the same thing the citizens are saying fuck you to police, and that's not going to solve anything.
No.
Or you're going to go out there and you're going to continue doing the fucking right thing and affecting change one life at a time when you touch them. Will you change every single citizen's life that don't know you, that already has a misconception of who you are? Absolutely not. But I'll tell you this, every single time that you get a call and you go to it, there's your chance to make a difference. There's your chance to change that one person at a time. And if many of you do that, I guarantee you're going to have the citizens backing you up more than the politicians will, and the power is in the people. So I would leave them as that is either you have two choices. You either can leave, go somewhere else where you're appreciated, or you can stay where you're at and understand that's the dire situation that you in, but you had raised your right hand to do this job, right? Do it to the best of your ability. Do it right. Do it with integrity. Do it because that badge represents so many officers who gave their lives before you doing that job. Don't tarnish the badge.
Alrighty. Well, I think we're going to leave with that. So where do people find you? Where do they find your stuff? Whether it's how do people find you? I know how to find you, but
so my personal page is Trung, Trung, B as in boy, Nguyen. Mm-hmm. My company's page is We Go Home, literally, and my supplements page is We Go Home Supplements, and our website is WeGoHomeSups SUPPS.com.
Alrighty. Well, if anything, whether or not this, I can say that your like greens and reds thing, your greens and reds package has been. I know you sent me one, so like this is kind of full disclosure. I've been using it for a while, and that one, for being, a Swedish meat eater, that one has been. I can tell you that has been. I have felt better using it. Now, it's not a scientific argument. It's not like, well, these numbers are here and there, but I definitely can tell you, like, consistency within digestion and day to day. It's not like I have more energy. It's not like I have more things. I noticed that small things are getting better, whether it's like digestive issues or stuff like that. So that one, this isn't medical advice. This isn't professional advice, but thank you for sending me. I've enjoyed that one. So I look forward to seeing what comes from you guys next. And then as I continue with the process of trying to build an in-home gym, I'm looking forward to the pre-workout. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're dropping our protein tomorrow, which is called MOAP, mother of all proteins. and we created that. One of the flavors is we're the first in the industry to do it, because you got to live that life to know, right? And a lot of these supplement companies are ran by civilians, so they don't live that life. So we created Ranger pudding. Okay. And we took the exact recipe from the MRE that we used to use during the regiment, Ranger School, whatever, and adopted and I sent it up above to the manufacturer, and they recreated it, and it tastes just like it. So we did something really cool with the flavor. But the most important thing for us, before I get off, because I think it's very important for people to realize, is like protein. A lot of proteins, 99.9% of protein is just basically whey protein. So what does it do? Is a post-workout shake, right? So you break down your muscle, you take the protein so it can help repair muscles. But the one thing that a lot of these proteins do not have is ligament repair. So we have ligament repair in our protein, hydrolyzed bovine collagen. So not only are you going to get muscle repair, but you're also repairing your joints and your ligaments and building bone density and having nicer hair, tighter skin and whatnot that you're going to get from the bovine. So we put together a pretty solid freaking formula. 100 calories, 25 grams, a scoop of protein, which is the cleanest protein scoop you can have. So think about 1 gram of protein is 4 calories.
That's awesome. It's for those who are counting it, that makes a lot of sense. Just my, like the big numbers thing. Like I'm glad to see that there is room to be made in the supplement category. I'm not. It's not my.
Yeah.
I
I love it. It's my passion, man.
It's not mine. It's not my. I am not the expert here, so it's definitely like I will defer this to you, and instead of deferring to the experts, whoever it is, the government appointed guy, I'm like, I have to make the risk, and I have to pick somebody. So thank you very much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes, sir. Me too.
So in closing, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast, and we are thankful for you guys coming on here. So if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and leave a comment below. Tell me about how bad you think my haircut is or something like that. Other than that, as a joke, if you're on Spotify and you're on social media, we do appreciate you following us, and we look forward to the next conversation. We'll talk to you guys soon.